The twin stars of the Carthenus system bathed the void in an amber glow, their light reflecting off the sleek hull of the HMS Resolute. A diplomatic vessel bearing the flag of Earth, its hull shimmered with symbols of unity, the emblem of the United Earth Alliance and the insignia of the Galactic Council, painted with meticulous care. The ship glided forward, a beacon of peace amidst the vast emptiness. On the bridge, Captain Elias Ward stood motionless, his sharp gaze fixed on the holographic display that projected the orbital lanes ahead. His uniform was pristine, his posture steady, yet a faint tension radiated from his presence. It was the kind of tension born of experience, the kind that sensed danger before it struck. "Transmit our arrival message," Ward ordered, his voice calm but firm. Lieutenant Avery Carter, stationed at the communications console, nodded briskly. "Yes, sir. Message on all open frequencies." The transmission was clear, delivered in Standard Galactic, a language designed to bridge civilizations across the stars. "This is the HMS Resolute, diplomatic vessel of the United Earth Alliance, on a mission of peace. We seek dialogue and cooperation with the people of the Carthenus system. Responding parties are welcome to establish communication." Ward glanced toward Commander Mark Franco, his second in command. "Any response?" Franco shook his head, his expression tense. "None so far. Their relays are active. They're hearing us." Ward's eyes narrowed. "Maintain our approach. Repeat the message every 2 minutes. Let's not give them a reason to doubt our intentions." The bridge fell into a tense silence, broken only by the soft hum of the ship's engines. On the radar console, Ensign Hoffman frowned, his brow furrowing, as faint anomalies flickered on his screen. "Captain," Hoffman said hesitantly, "I'm picking up movement near the asteroid cluster. Could be debris, but—" Ward stepped closer, his sharp eyes scanning the display. "Mark the location. Keep an eye on it." Meanwhile, below deck, the diplomatic delegation prepared for their mission. Ambassador Victor Lane adjusted his ceremonial sash, his reflection staring back from the polished surface of the bulkhead. Beside him, analysts and aides murmured softly, finalizing reports and rehearsing protocols. "This mission is critical," Lane said, his tone resolute. "The Carthenus system could become a cornerstone for the Council's outreach programs. If we succeed here, humanity's reputation will be elevated across the galaxy." An aide nodded. "And if we fail?" Lane didn't answer, but the weight of his silence spoke volumes. And then, the silence was broken. "Multiple contacts inbound." Hoffman's voice rang out from the radar station, sharp and urgent. "No transponder codes. Their trajectory, straight for us." Ward's demeanor sharpened instantly. "Sound battle stations. Shields up. Identify them." Hoffman typed rapidly at his console. "They're not broadcasting. Their configuration, unknown. And they're powering weapons." Ward gripped the edge of his console. "Lieutenant Carter, broadcast an immediate ceasefire request. Let them know we're a diplomatic vessel." Carter's voice wavered slightly as he relayed the message. "Attention, approaching vessels. This is the HMS Resolute on a mission of peace. Cease your approach and state your intentions." There was no response. Instead, the unknown ships surged forward, their angular hulls glinting with menacing precision. A volley of plasma fire erupted from the lead ship, slamming into the Resolute's shields. The bridge shuddered violently, alarms blaring as the crew scrambled to respond. "Shields holding at 60%!" Franco shouted over the chaos. "They're focusing fire on critical systems." "Evasive maneuvers," Ward barked. "And keep broadcasting. They need to know we're not a threat." The ship banked hard to port, engines roaring as it attempted to evade the relentless onslaught. Plasma bolts and kinetic rounds hammered against its hull, each impact tearing away layers of its defenses. Below deck, the delegation braced against the violent shaking, their expressions shifting from fear to disbelief. "This was supposed to be a mission of peace," Lane shouted, his voice barely audible over the cacophony. "Why aren't they responding?" Back on the bridge, Ward's voice cut through the chaos. "Initiate the distress beacon. Transmit all data and audio logs. Earth needs to know what's happening here." The interface lit up under the rapid movements of Carter's hands. Distress signal active. The Resolute's auxiliary defenses sputtered to life, sending sporadic bursts of plasma fire toward the attackers. It was a desperate, futile effort. The enemy ships were relentless, their coordinated strikes tearing through the remaining escort vessels. One by one, the smaller ships disintegrated into fiery wreckage. "We're losing the fleet!" Franco shouted. "The Endeavour just went down!" Ward's face was grim, his voice steady despite the chaos. "All hands, prepare to abandon ship. Prioritize the delegation. Get them to the escape pods." The bridge crew worked with precision, even as the ship's systems failed one by one. Fires raged through the corridors, smoke billowing as emergency lights flickered ominously. The Resolute groaned under the strain, its hull fracturing as critical sections collapsed. Ward stood firm at his station, his gaze unwavering as the flames crept closer. A chilling voice crackled through the comms, cold and unyielding. "Let this serve as a warning. Your kind is not welcome here. We do not negotiate with humans." The message ended just as the Resolute's engine core detonated. The bridge was engulfed in fire and debris, the once proud vessel fracturing into fragments that illuminated the void. For a brief moment, silence reigned. Then, sharp beams of light pierced the darkness, targeting the escape pods as they streaked away from the wreckage. One by one, they erupted into bright, fleeting explosions. The lone surviving pod, its signal faint but persistent, drifted on borrowed time. But the enemy was thorough. A final, calculated shot obliterated the pod, leaving only silence and the faint glow of scattered debris. The void reclaimed its stillness, but the echoes of the massacre had already begun their journey to Earth. The holographic screens in the United Earth Alliance's command center flickered with the transmission. The haunting final moments of the HMS Resolute filled the room with images of chaos. Flames consuming the ship, desperate cries for help, and the cold, unyielding voice of the attackers delivering their chilling warning. At the center of the chamber, Admiral Bryce Kane stood, his broad shoulders tense. Around him, Earth's top leaders sat in stunned silence. Senior military officials, diplomatic advisors, and intelligence analysts. The recording ended, leaving the room cloaked in an oppressive quiet. "Send this to Chancellor Madden immediately," Kane ordered, his voice a low rumble. "He needs to see this before addressing the Council." Across the stars at the Galactic Council's Grand Assembly Station, Chancellor Declan Madden received the encrypted transmission in his private chamber. The dim light of the room illuminated his sharp features as he replayed the footage. Chancellor Madden's expression darkened as the footage played. His jaw clenched at the attacker's final words. "We will not negotiate with humans." Madden closed the recording and leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. Moments later, his comm unit chimed. The familiar voice of Admiral Kane came through, steady but laced with urgency. "Chancellor, you've seen it?" Kane asked. "I have," Madden replied, his tone clipped. "It's worse than I imagined. Their message wasn't just an attack on our delegation. It's a statement." "And the Council?" Kane's voice grew harder. "What are they prepared to do about it?" Madden's lips pressed into a thin line. "That remains to be seen. I'll address the Assembly shortly. If they're unwilling to act, we must be ready to respond." Kane's reply was resolute. "You'll have Earth's full backing, Chancellor, whatever it takes." The Galactic Council's Grand Assembly Hall was a sprawling circular chamber, its walls adorned with banners representing the dozens of species under its governance. Chancellor Madden stepped onto the central dais, his expression steeled as the room buzzed with low murmurs. The holographic projection of the Resolute's final moments played for the assembled delegates, silencing the whispers. "My fellow representatives," Madden began, his voice carrying through the chamber. "Humanity came to the Cartheni system as ambassadors of peace. We sought dialogue, cooperation, and understanding. Instead, our delegation was met with annihilation." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "This act cannot go unanswered. We demand this Council denounce the attack and commit to identifying and holding the perpetrators accountable. Anything less undermines the very foundation of our interstellar alliance." For a moment, silence held. Then, Consul Dren Kesh of the Thrin Alliance rose, his segmented body shifting smoothly as dozens of jointed appendages clicked against the floor. His head, a bulbous mass supported by a flexible stalk, turned toward Madden. 4 small black eyes focused unblinking, while his voice emitted a low, rhythmic cadence through a series of vents along his torso. Chancellor Madden, while the loss of your delegation is indeed tragic, we must consider the broader context. Humanity's presence in the Carthenus system was premature. That region's history of resistance to Council influence suggests your mission may have been perceived as provocation. A ripple of agreement passed through some of the chamber. Madden's jaw tightened, but he held his composure as Kesh continued. It is imperative we investigate thoroughly before condemning anyone. To act rashly risks destabilizing an already fragile situation. He gestured to the still image of the Resolute's destruction. You've seen the footage. What more do you need to condemn this massacre? A delegate from the Calran Confederacy, a serpentine figure with overlapping scales of deep crimson, hissed before speaking. Her eyes, narrow and piercing, flicked toward Madden with predatory precision. Chancellor, it is precisely that footage that raises questions. Was your mission peaceful, though it claimed to be, not an overstep? The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Madden's voice grew colder. You're suggesting that our mission, to foster peace and cooperation, justifies slaughter? Before the debate could escalate further, Speaker Calith, the presiding officer, intervened. Enough, Speaker Calith declared, his voice resonating with finality. The Council has determined that humanity's actions in the Carthenus system were reckless and precipitated unnecessary conflict. As such, Chancellor Madden, you are hereby removed from your position within this Council, effective immediately. Humanity will be barred from leading or participating in diplomatic missions until this matter is thoroughly investigated and resolved. The chamber's murmur grew louder. Madden's fists clenched at his sides, but he maintained his composure. Understood, Speaker, he said, his voice tight. With a sharp turn, he exited the dais, his frustration evident in his stride. In his private chamber aboard the station, Madden paced, his mind racing. A secure line connected him back to Earth, where Admiral Kane and other leaders awaited an update. They refused to act, Madden said without preamble. Not only that, they implied we provoked the attack. Kane's expression darkened. Typical. They'll twist the narrative to avoid responsibility. What's our next move? Madden stopped pacing and faced the display. We find the truth ourselves. Assemble every resource we have. Intelligence, surveillance, diplomacy. Someone in the Carthenus factions knows who ordered this. We expose them and force the Council's hand. The war room at Earth's United Defense Command hummed with activity, its subdued lighting casting long shadows over the busy consoles. Around the central holographic display, Admiral Bryce Kane stood like an immovable fortress, his broad shoulders squared as he studied the swirling projections of the Carthenus system. Every moon, asteroid, and orbital station was mapped in stunning detail, glowing faintly against the darkened room. Begin the briefing, Kane ordered, his voice cutting through the murmurs of gathered officers and analysts. Lieutenant Colonel Anton Brody stepped forward, gesturing to the hologram. Based on the available data, the Carthenus factions maintain 3 major strongholds: Orbital Station Aurex, the fortified moon of Lyridon, and their primary base on Carthenus Prime itself. Each is heavily defended, but the station appears to be their nerve center. Kane's eyes narrowed. What's the status of our intelligence efforts? From the corner, Lieutenant Darren Foyle responded, We're cross-referencing the black box transmission from the Resolute with intercepted comms from our deep space satellites. Early analysis has picked up encrypted chatter between Carthenus Prime and several outer Council worlds. Any confirmed Council links? Kane asked sharply. Foyle hesitated. Not yet, sir. But we've detected patterns suggesting coordination. A few key phrases align with previous incidents involving rogue Council factions. We're still decrypting the more complex layers. Brody brought up the hologram's key locations, his voice steady. We propose a multi-pronged assault. Phase 1. Deploy stealth reconnaissance to gather real-time intel on their defenses. Phase 2. Launch targeted strikes on orbital assets to cripple their command and communications. Phase 3. Initiate a ground offensive on Carthenus Prime to extract key leaders and secure proof of their involvement. Kane nodded. No unnecessary risks to civilians. This isn't a conquest. It's a precision operation to expose the truth. Meanwhile, in the intelligence division, a team of cryptographers and analysts worked tirelessly in a sprawling chamber lined with holoscreens. The encrypted transmissions from the Carthenus factions scrolled across the displays, fragments of alien text interspersed with familiar terms. Council, diplomatic immunity, and most damning of all, resolute. Chief Analyst Jacob Griggs leaned over one terminal, his brow furrowed as he pieced together the disjointed messages. "They're careful, but not infallible," he muttered to his team. "Look here, repeated use of the same cipher patterns. It's sloppy for high-level communications. We can exploit that." An analyst tapped on his keyboard, breaking the silence. "Got something. A partial decryption mentions RX station. Something about logistical oversight for..." He trailed off, his face pale. "Unmarked council resources." Griggs's eyes widened. "Flag that immediately. If they're funneling council assets, this goes deeper than we thought." The weight of the discovery settled over the room like a storm cloud, but there was no time to dwell. While the analysts worked to untangle the web of encrypted data, humanity's response moved into its next critical phase. In orbit above Earth, the HMS Valiant, a Titan-class carrier, loomed in dry dock as teams of engineers swarmed its hull. Massive cranes hoisted reinforced plating into position, while the glow of welding torches lit the shadowed recesses of its hangar bays. On board, Captain Adrian Bianco stood on the bridge, overseeing final preparations. "Status report," he called to his XO, Commander Rupert Varma. "Main weapon systems are fully operational," Varma replied. "The primary railgun has been recalibrated for precision strikes, and the stealth modules have passed their diagnostics. Ground assault vehicles are loading into bays 3 and 4 as we speak." Bianco nodded. "Ensure all squads are briefed. If this mission goes as planned, we'll be operating under enemy fire with limited support. I want every man and woman ready for rapid deployment." Varma's expression was grim, but resolute. "They'll be ready, sir." As the Valiant's crew finalized preparations, the command center on Earth was alive with purpose. In the war room, Kane addressed his assembled officers for the final time before the fleet's departure. "We're not just fighting for the Resolute," he began, his voice heavy with determination. "We're fighting to prove that humanity won't be silenced, no matter how powerful our enemies think they are." He gestured to the holographic display, now showing the fleet's formation. "This isn't a war of conquest. It's a war of truth. We'll expose the corruption that led to this massacre, and we'll remind the galaxy why humanity deserves its place among the stars." The officers rose to their feet, their salutes crisp and unified. As the room emptied, Kane lingered, staring at the projection of the Carthenese system. He knew the cost of the mission would be high, but failure was not an option. Moments later, aboard the HMS Valiant, the fleet's engines roared to life. One by one, Earth's warships broke free from their docks, their sleek forms disappearing into the vast expanse of space. In their wake, a quiet resolve settled over those left behind, their hopes resting on the men and women hurtling toward the unknown. The HMS Valiant emerged from its final jump, leading the human fleet into the outer edges of the Carthenus system. The transition from hyperspace was seamless, but the tension aboard the Titan-class carrier was tangible, hanging in the air like a storm about to break. On the bridge, Captain Adrian Bianco stood rigid, his hands clasped tightly behind his back as he scanned the sprawling holographic display of the system. The array of moons, asteroid belts, and orbital stations shimmered with ominous potential. "Status report," Bianco barked, his voice steady but laced with urgency. Commander Rupert Varma, stationed at the tactical console, replied swiftly. "Fleet integrity confirmed. All ships accounted for. No immediate contacts on sensors, but..." He hesitated briefly. "Passive scans are detecting faint energy fluctuations near Lyridon's orbit. Could be cloaked assets." Bianco nodded, signaling his approval. "Signal the fleet to maintain formation. Shields up. Weapon systems on standby. No one fires unless provoked." The Valiant's escort ships, a mix of frigates and destroyers, adjusted their positions, forming a protective phalanx around the larger carrier. The blackness of space stretched out before them, deceptively calm. "Multiple signatures detected," Lieutenant Darren Foyle's voice cut through the tension. Hostile vessels inbound from the asteroid cluster ahead. No transponders, but their trajectory. They were waiting for us. Bianco's eyes narrowed. Sound battle stations. Commander Varma, I want a full tactical analysis and firing solutions immediately. Varma's hands moved with precision over his console as the enemy fleet's composition materialized on the holographic display. Sleek, angular ships, their hulls glinting with advanced energy shielding, surged forward in coordinated formations. 10 vessels confirmed. Estimated weapon systems outmatch ours in range and precision. They're optimized for ambush tactics. Then let's deny them the ambush, Bianco said grimly. Deploy flanking wings. Force them to spread their fire. Helm control. Take us into the debris field. Use the asteroids as cover. The Valiant's engines roared to life, propelling the massive carrier into the jagged expanse of the asteroid cluster. Smaller human ships followed suit, weaving through the rocky terrain with practiced precision. The first salvo from the enemy fleet streaked through the void, narrowly missing the carrier as its shields flared in response. Incoming fire, Varma reported. They're targeting our flanking ships. Bianco's expression hardened. Redirect power to forward shields. Give the frigates room to maneuver. Weapons control, return fire. Target their lead ship's propulsion system. Priority is break their formation. The Valiant's railguns unleashed a volley of kinetic rounds, their impact rippling through the lead enemy vessel's shields. A moment later, a precision strike from one of the escort frigates disabled the ship's engines, sending it careening into a nearby asteroid. Direct hit, Varma confirmed, their formations faltering. The battle raged on, a deadly dance of strategy and firepower. The human fleet's cohesion and adaptability began to turn the tide, exploiting the asteroids for cover, while delivering calculated strikes to the enemy's weaker flanks. Yet the enemy's technological superiority was undeniable. Damage report, Bianco demanded as the Valiant shuddered under a direct hit. Minor hull breaches on decks 4 and 7, Varma replied. Structural integrity holding, but the frigate Solaris has taken heavy fire. They're requesting immediate support. Deploy the Vanguard squadron to cover them, Bianco ordered, and keep their comms open. I want status updates every 30 seconds. Amid the chaos, an encrypted transmission pinged on the Valiant's intelligence channel. Lieutenant Foyle, monitoring the stream, called out, "Sir, we've intercepted a signal. It's heavily encrypted, but it's originating from Oryx Station." "Can you decipher it?" Bianco asked, his tone sharp. "Already working on it," Foyle replied. "Preliminary analysis indicates it's a command relay. They're coordinating their fleet movements from there." "Patch the data to Intelligence Division," Bianco ordered, "and inform the fleet. Oryx Station just became our primary objective." As the battle continued, the intercepted transmission provided a crucial advantage. The human fleet adjusted its tactics, focusing on disrupting the enemy's lines of communication. One by one, the hostile ships began to falter, their coordinated maneuvers devolving into disarray. By the time the last enemy ship retreated into the void, the Valiant's bridge was filled with a mixture of exhaustion and relief. But the victory was tempered by the losses sustained. "Status?" Bianco asked, his voice quieter now. Varma surveyed the damage reports. 2 frigates destroyed, multiple casualties across the fleet, but we held the line. Bianco nodded grimly. "Prepare a report for Admiral Kane, and send our condolences to the families of the fallen. They gave everything for this mission." The intercepted data was transmitted to the fleet's intelligence analysts, who worked feverishly to decode the signal. As the Valiant and its surviving escorts pressed deeper into the Carthini system, the pieces of a larger conspiracy began to emerge. "Captain," Foyle called out, his voice tense, "we've decrypted part of the transmission. It confirms coordination between the Cartheni's factions and—" He hesitated, swallowing hard. "A high-ranking council member." The bridge fell silent as the weight of the revelation sank in. Bianco's gaze hardened. "Get that information to command immediately, and inform the fleet. We're not just fighting a rogue faction anymore. We're fighting to uncover the truth." The HMS Valiant loomed over the smoldering wreckage of the recent battle, its railguns still faintly glowing from the intense skirmish. Inside the carrier's war room, Captain Adrian Bianco and Commander Rupert Varma stood around a holographic table, reviewing the debris field while preparing for the next phase of their mission. Our scouts report a weakened patrol unit near Oryx Station, Varma began, gesturing to a cluster of enemy signals on the hologram. If we strike fast, we can capture key personnel before they regroup. Bianco nodded, his expression grim. Do it. Alert the Solaris's ground teams. They'll lead the boarding operation. Tell them to take prisoners, alive. Minutes later, the boarding craft detached from the Valiant, descending toward the damaged enemy vessel. Inside, the strike team moved with precision, their black armor blending into the dim lighting of the ship's corridors. Major Nikolai Rigg, leading the team, signaled a halt as they reached the command deck. Thermal scans show 3 hostiles inside, Rigg whispered, his visor glowing faintly. Prepare for breach. As flash charges detonated, and the strike team stormed the command deck. The first officer, a hulking biped covered in coarse, moss-like fibers, let out a guttural roar before being subdued, his clawed hands restrained by magnetic cuffs. Beside him, a wiry, insectoid figure skittered backward, its 6 limbs moving in frantic synchronization. Its translucent carapace glinted faintly under the flickering lights, and its antennae twitched erratically as it surrendered. Commander Vres, seated at the central console, rose slowly. His elongated frame, covered in matte black segmented plates, gave him a skeletal appearance, and his narrow, slit-like eyes regarded the humans with cold calculation. With practiced efficiency, the team deployed flash charges, breaching the door and storming the room. The enemy officers, caught off guard, surrendered quickly, their weapons clattering to the floor. Rigg's men restrained the captives and began securing the area. "Identify yourselves," Rigg demanded, his voice sharp. One of the prisoners, a gaunt figure with scales glistening under the emergency lighting, sneered but remained silent. "Search their databanks," Rigg ordered. "Anything we can use to piece this together." Back aboard the Valiant, the captured officers were placed in containment cells. Bianco observed them through a reinforced viewport, while Varma reviewed the initial interrogation reports. "They're not talking," Varma said. "But our tech teams have already pulled partial data logs from their ship. It's damning." Bianco's gaze didn't waver from the prisoners. "How damning?" "Enough to confirm their coordination with Council elements," Varma replied, sliding a tablet across the console. "Encrypted orders referencing Oryx Station as a relay hub, and a name. Consul Dren Kesh." Bianco's gaze hardened. "We need more than partial data. Bring in someone who can make them talk." Moments later, Lieutenant Darren Foyle, the fleet's intelligence officer, entered the room. His analytical demeanor contrasted with the tense atmosphere. "Captain, if I may," Foyle began, "we've decrypted additional communications from their network. They outline specific steps to neutralize the Resolute and suppress evidence of Council involvement." Bianco's hands tightened into fists. "We're close, but close doesn't win wars." In the Valiant's interrogation chamber, Rigg stood before the prisoners, his presence imposing. The gaunt officer, identified as Commander Vres, finally broke under the pressure. "You think your fleet will survive what's coming?" Vres spat, his voice dripping with contempt. "You're meddling in affairs far beyond your station." "What affairs?" Rigg pressed, his tone sharp and unyielding. Vres sat rigid in the containment cell, his segmented plates shifting slightly as if adjusting to the room's temperature. His narrow, slit-like pupils fixed on Rigg with an unsettling calm, while his long, spindly fingers tapped rhythmically against the table's edge, creating a faint, deliberate sound that echoed in the tense chamber. "Who gave the order to attack the Resolute?" Rigg demanded again. Vres hesitated, his scales rippling with unease as a deep, metallic exhale escaped his vents. "Oryx Station, that's all I'll say. Destroy it if you must, but you'll only fan the flames." Rigg leaned in closer, his voice lowering to a dangerous calm. "What flames?" Vres's lips curled into a cruel smile. "The ones that will burn away your fragile unity. The Council isn't what you think it is." The revelations reached Admiral Bryce Kane aboard Earth's command hub. Kane, now fully apprised of the Valiant's findings, convened an emergency meeting with the fleet commanders via encrypted channels. The captured officer confirmed Oryx Station's role in the conspiracy, Kane said, his tone measured but furious. And the mention of Consul Kesh ties this directly to the Council. If we move now, we can extract the evidence we need before they cover their tracks. Captain Bianco appeared on one of the screens, his expression resolute. Admiral, their defenses are formidable. A direct assault risks heavy losses, but delaying gives them time to reinforce. What's the priority? Exposing the Council or neutralizing the Carthanis factions? Kane's face hardened. Both. We'll split our forces. The Valiant and its task group will focus on extracting data from Oryx. The remaining fleet will contain the faction's military assets. We cannot let this conspiracy deepen. The decision was set. As the fleet maneuvered into position, Bianco addressed his crew. We're up against an enemy that believes they can outmaneuver and outgun us. Prove them wrong. This mission isn't just about survival. It's about holding them accountable. With their orders clear, the Valiant and its strike group engaged the final phase of their approach, diving headlong toward Oryx Station, where the truth and the next battle awaited. The HMS Valiant's engines roared as the fleet maneuvered through the Carthanis system's outer orbit. The wreckage of prior skirmishes glinted against the backdrop of distant stars, serving as a grim reminder of the stakes. On the bridge, Captain Adrian Bianco stood before the main display, his face a mask of steely focus. Commander Rupert Varma approached, carrying an updated tactical report. Admiral Kane has issued his orders, Varma said, passing the tablet to Bianco. Our task group will initiate the first phase of the operation against Oryx Station. Reinforcements from the secondary fleet are in position to counter any retaliatory strikes from Carthanis Prime. Bianco nodded, his eyes scanning the detailed positions of enemy assets. They'll know we're coming. Oryx is the linchpin in their operations. They'll defend it with everything they have. Varma's expression tightened. Intel suggests their defensive grid has been bolstered since the Vrace interrogation. They're coordinating their propaganda as well. Broadcasts from Carthanis Prime are claiming we're here to subjugate their people. Bianco exhaled sharply. Let them talk. The truth will speak louder. Have the fleet maintain calm silence. We'll let our actions be our answer. Meanwhile, on the surface of Lyridon, the fortified moon orbiting Carthanis Prime, Major Nikolaj Rigg led his ground team through a network of rocky canyons. Their objective was to neutralize a planetary defense array capable of targeting the fleet's reinforcements. The jagged terrain offered both cover and peril, with enemy patrols weaving through the narrow paths. Thermals picking up activity ahead, one of Rigg's men reported, his visor displaying faint signatures amidst the shadows. Rigg raised his hand, signaling the team to halt. He motioned to Sergeant Hall to advance silently and scout. Moments later, Hall returned, his voice a low whisper. 2 sentries near the eastern ridge. They've got a drone operating on a sweep pattern. Rigg nodded. We'll take them quietly. Hall, take the left flank with Carter. I'll lead the approach. The team moved with practiced precision. Within minutes, the sentries were down and the drone was disabled. Rigg crouched near the ridge's edge, peering at the defense array nestled in a fortified compound below. There it is, he muttered. Varma wasn't exaggerating. They've got automated turrets and a shield generator. This won't be easy. One of his men smirked. Easy missions don't end wars, sir. Rigg's lips twitched in the faintest hint of a smile. Good. Let's get to work. Back aboard the Valiant, the fleet's advance toward Oryx Station was met with fierce resistance. Enemy ships, sleek and bristling with advanced weaponry, emerged from behind a nearby asteroid cluster, their movements coordinated with eerie precision. Enemy fleet closing fast, Lieutenant Darren Foyle called out from the tactical station. They've deployed frigates to cut off our flanking maneuvers. Bianco's voice was calm but firm. Reposition the Halifax to draw fire away from the main group. Have the Solaris provide sensor support from the rear. Its damage makes it vulnerable in direct combat. Prepare the Valiant's railguns for a precision strike on their command vessel. The bridge crew worked in synchronized efficiency, and moments later, the Valiant's main railgun unleashed a searing bolt of kinetic energy. The projectile tore through the enemy's lead ship, creating a cascade of secondary explosions that lit up the battlefield. Direct hit, Foyle confirmed. Their formation is breaking. Bianco nodded. Press the advantage. Target their communication relays. Without coordination, they're just another fleet. As the human fleet gained momentum, intercepted transmissions began pouring in. Foyle analyzed the chatter, his brow furrowing. "Captain, they're broadcasting distress signals, but not to their own reinforcements. These are going to neutral systems, appealing for aid against an Earth-led invasion." Bianco's expression darkened. Classic deflection. They're trying to manipulate the narrative. Send this to Admiral Kane immediately. Admiral Kane received the report in his command center. His expression was unreadable as he addressed the gathered officers via a secure channel. Their propaganda machine is in full swing. If neutral systems believe their lies, we'll face more than just Carthenus. Our objective hasn't changed. Secure Oryx Station and uncover the proof we need. Once the truth is out, no narrative can stand against it. Kane's tone grew sharper. "Deploy additional intelligence units. I want eyes and ears in every corner of the system. And prepare the broadcast team. If they want to play this game, we'll make sure the galaxy hears our side." On the ground, Riggs' team breached the compound's outer defenses with surgical precision. Explosions rippled through the facility as charges detonated along critical support beams, leaving the enemy's automated turrets offline. Rigg and his men pushed forward, encountering pockets of resistance, but moving with relentless determination. "Command," Rigg said into his comm. "Defense array neutralized. Fleet reinforcements have a clear path." Varma's voice replied. "Excellent work, Major. Extract your team and regroup with the Valiant. We're preparing for the final push." As the Valiant closed in on Oryx Station, the cracks in the enemy's facade began to show. Civilian transmissions from Carthenus Prime painted a picture of growing unrest. Reports of forced conscriptions and resources diverted from essential services to the war effort began circulating, undermining the leaders' narrative of defending their people. Bianco, reviewing the reports, turned to Varma. "This is it. They're losing their grip. If we can amplify these transmissions, it might push their own population to question their leaders." Varma nodded. "I'll have the intelligence team prioritize it. And Captain, good luck out there." With the fleet's next objective clear and the enemy's defenses faltering, the stage was set for the final confrontation at Oryx Station. The truth was within reach, and humanity's resolve burned brighter than ever. As preparations intensified, the HMS Valiant hovered in the shadow of a massive asteroid, its engines humming softly to maintain a low-energy profile. Around the command table in the war room, Captain Adrian Bianco, Commander Rupert Varma, and Major Nikolai Rigg reviewed the final briefing for the infiltration team. The holographic projection of Oryx Station spun slowly above the table, its structure bristling with defensive turrets and energy shields. "We'll use the debris field to approach undetected," Varma said, pointing to a gap in the station's patrol routes. "The insertion team will dock at the maintenance airlock here. Once inside, they'll have to move fast. Our intel suggests their security response time is under 5 minutes. Rigg nodded, his face calm but focused. "We'll get it done. What's the primary objective?" "Secure the station's central data core," Bianco ordered. "We're looking for direct evidence, communications logs, directives, anything that ties the Carthenese leadership to the Council conspiracy." He fixed his gaze on Rigg. "No unnecessary risks." Rigg straightened, his expression resolute. "Understood, sir." In the Valiant's hangar bay, Rigg and his team performed final checks on their equipment. Black, matte-finished armor covered their bodies, and their helmets glinted faintly under the bay's dim lighting. Each operative carried a compact pulse rifle and a small pack of specialized tools designed for infiltration. "All systems green," Rigg said, securing his helmet. He turned to his team. "Remember, speed and silence. We're in, we're out. No heroics." The operatives nodded in unison, their visors reflecting the faint glow of the dropship's interior as they boarded. Moments later, the ship detached from the Valiant and slipped into the asteroid field, its stealth systems rendering it nearly invisible. Oryx Station loomed ahead, its surface a web of metallic corridors and docking bays. The dropship weaved through the debris field, narrowly avoiding detection as it approached the maintenance airlock. Inside, Rigg monitored the countdown on his HUD. "Approaching the insertion point," the pilot whispered over the comms. "Airlock access in 30 seconds. The ship latched onto the airlock with a soft clunk. Rigg signaled his team to move. "Go, go, go!" The operatives moved with practiced precision, breaching the airlock and entering the station's dimly lit corridors. The hum of machinery filled the air as they advanced, their movements synchronized and silent. "Thermals show 2 guards around the corner," whispered Sergeant Carter, gesturing to a nearby junction. Riggs signaled for a takedown. The team split into 2 groups, flanking the guards and incapacitating them in seconds with stun pulses. Riggs checked the corridor ahead, his visor scanning for threats. "Clear. Carter, lock down their comms. No alarms." Carter nodded, pulling a small device from his pack and attaching it to the station's comm relay. Comms scrambled. "We've got a window." The team advanced deeper into the station, navigating a labyrinth of corridors until they reached the central data core. A massive, cylindrical structure filled the room, its surface covered in blinking lights and rotating data conduits. "Rig to command," the major whispered into his comm. "We've reached the core. Beginning data extraction." "Copy that," Bianco's voice replied. "You have 5 minutes. Make it count." Carter and another operative worked swiftly at the portable terminals, navigating through the core's systems with practiced efficiency. Streams of encrypted data flooded their screens as they bypassed firewalls and security protocols. "We're in," Carter announced. "Downloading now." As the data transfer progressed, Rigg kept watch near the entrance, his pulse rifle at the ready. The sound of approaching footsteps made him tense. "Hostiles incoming," he whispered. "Defensive positions. Hold until the transfer is complete." The team took cover, their weapons trained on the doorway. Moments later, a squad of enemy soldiers stormed in, their weapons blazing. The room erupted in a cacophony of pulse fire and shouted commands. Rigg's team held their ground, their disciplined volleys of fire cutting through the enemy ranks. "Transfer complete!" Carter shouted over the commotion. "Fall back!" Rigg ordered. The team began a fighting retreat, laying down suppressing fire as they moved back toward the airlock. Back aboard the Valiant, the recovered data was immediately decrypted and analyzed. Foyle, the fleet's intelligence officer, worked alongside Varma to sift through the trove of information. Their expressions grew darker as the pieces fell into place. "It's worse than we thought," Foyle muttered. "This isn't just about eliminating human influence. They're consolidating power across multiple systems, using the Council as a cover." The HMS Valiant and its strike group emerged from the asteroid field, their formation precise and unwavering. Ahead lay Carthenus Prime, the stronghold of the system's leadership and the epicenter of their resistance. The planet's orbital defenses lit up like a constellation of menace, turrets and missile platforms locking onto the approaching fleet. "Report," Captain Adrian Bianco commanded from the Valiant's bridge, his eyes fixed on the holographic display of the battle theater. Commander Rupert Varma stood beside him, reviewing the tactical overlays. "Their defense grid is fully operational. Long-range batteries are targeting our frigates, and enemy fighters are scrambling from the surface. They're throwing everything they have at us." Bianco's expression steeled. "Deploy the Vanguard squadrons to draw their fire. Signal the Solaris and Halifax to flank their orbital platforms. We'll take the Valiant straight through the gap once it's open." The bridge buzzed with activity as orders were relayed. Human fighters launched from the Valiant's hangars, their engines roaring as they darted into the fray. The battle unfolded in a symphony of chaos, with explosions lighting up the void and comms filled with sharp, urgent voices. "Enemy frigate down," Varma reported. "But we've lost contact with the stalwart. They took heavy fire from a missile barrage." Bianco's expression darkened. "We'll honor them later. For now, focus on breaking through." On the surface of Carthenus Prime, Major Nikolai Rigg led a ground assault team toward the planetary capital. The city's skyline was dominated by the spires of the Central Command Complex, now heavily fortified with barricades and automated defenses. Rigg's team moved under the cover of darkness, their advance synchronized with orbital strikes targeting key enemy positions. "Rigg to command," he said into his comm. "We're approaching the outer perimeter. Resistance is heavier than expected, requesting additional support." "Acknowledged," came Varma's voice from the Valiant. "Reinforcements are en route. Hold your position and prepare for synchronized breach." Rigg signaled his team to take cover behind a ruined transport vehicle as enemy fire rained down. The air was thick with the smell of burning metal and ozone. "Carter," Rigg barked, "deploy charges on that barricade. We'll cover you." Sergeant Carter moved swiftly, planting explosives along the reinforced structure. Moments later, a controlled detonation tore through the barricade, creating a breach. Riggs' team surged forward, exchanging fire with entrenched enemy troops. Their movements were precise, their discipline unshakable. Back in orbit, the Valiant's railguns unleashed a volley that shattered one of the enemy's primary defense platforms. The explosion rippled through the void, clearing a path for the fleet to close in on Carthenus Prime. Platform neutralized, Varma reported. But we're detecting a large energy spike from the surface. Looks like they're activating an orbital cannon. Bianco's eyes narrowed. Not on my watch. Target that cannon with everything we have. Priority 1. The Valiant's weapon systems recalibrated, focusing their firepower on the energy signature below. The cannon's protective shields flickered under the relentless assault, and a final precision strike from the Solaris's railgun silenced it for good. Cannon destroyed, Varma confirmed, a rare note of relief in his voice. Bianco nodded. Good. Now let's finish this. Riggs' team breached the Central Command complex, their path cleared by coordinated orbital strikes. Inside, the corridors were a maze of resistance, but the team pushed forward with relentless determination. They reached the command center, where the system's leaders had barricaded themselves. Surrender, Rigg demanded, his voice amplified by his helmet's external comms. It's over. The leaders, a collection of alien figures clad in ornate uniforms, hesitated. Their fear was palpable, but one among them, a tall figure with crimson skin and a crest of spines, stepped forward. You think this ends here? The leader hissed. You may have won the battle, but you've ignited a war you cannot control. Riggs' gaze didn't waver. We'll take that risk. Stand down, or we'll make you. The standoff ended as the leaders dropped their weapons, their expressions a mix of defeat and defiance. Riggs' team secured the room, transmitting confirmation to the Valiant. Hours later, aboard the Valiant, a live transmission was prepared. The captured leaders, under the watchful eyes of Rigg and his men, confessed to their conspiracy. The transmission was broadcast across the system and beyond, revealing their alliance with the corrupt Council faction and their role in the massacre of the Resolute. We sought to eliminate humanity as a political force, one of the leaders admitted, his voice trembling. We feared their influence, their unity, and we paid the price for underestimating them. The confession sent shockwaves through the galaxy. Neutral systems began re-evaluating their stance, and unrest simmered within the Council as calls for reform grew louder. On the Valiant's bridge, Bianco watched the transmission end. He turned to Varma, his expression resolute. They thought they could stop us. They were wrong. Varma nodded. The battle's won, but the war, it's far from over. Bianco's gaze hardened. Then we'll keep fighting, until there's nothing left to fight for. Minutes later, the HMS Valiant hung like a silent sentinel over Carthenus Prime, its once bristling defenses now reduced to faintly glowing debris fields. The remnants of the enemy's orbital fleet floated lifelessly, their shattered hulls testament to the brutal efficiency of humanity's retaliation. On the bridge, Captain Adrian Bianco studied the tactical map with a critical eye. Varma, Bianco said, turning to his executive officer, confirm the status of the remaining defenses. Commander Rupert Varma ran his hands over the control console, bringing up the latest reports. Long-range scans show no active enemy vessels in orbit. Ground resistance is limited to scattered pockets. The central command structure is secure, and Major Riggs' team is advancing toward the capital's heart. Bianco gave a curt nod. Deploy scout teams to ensure there are no surprises. Keep the fleet in high alert until the formal surrender is complete. On the surface, Major Nikolai Riggs' boots crunched against the shattered remains of what had once been a grand plaza. The towering spires of the capital city loomed ahead, their once pristine facades scarred by orbital strikes and ground skirmishes. His team moved in tight formation, scanning for threats as they approached the central command building. Rig to command, he said into his comm. We've reached the final perimeter. Enemy resistance is minimal. They're either retreating or preparing to surrender. Acknowledged, Varma's voice replied. Proceed with caution. The Valiant is maintaining overwatch. The massive double doors of the command structure stood ajar, their reinforced frames warped by the concussive force of earlier strikes. Riggs signaled his team to fan out, securing the entrance as he stepped inside. The air was thick with smoke and the acrid stench of scorched metal. In the main chamber, the surviving leaders of the Carthanis regime stood in a huddled group, their expressions a mix of fear and resignation. The alien figures, adorned in ceremonial robes now stained and tattered, glanced nervously at one another as Riggs approached. "This is over," Riggs said, his tone firm but calm. "Surrender now, and your lives will be spared. Resist, and you'll force us to take measures we'd rather avoid." One of the leaders, a skinny figure with silvery skin and elongated limbs, stepped forward, holding a trembling hand aloft. We surrender. We will comply with your terms." Riggs gestured to his men, who moved swiftly to secure the room. Data pads and weapons were confiscated, and a secure channel was opened to the Valiant. "Command, the leadership has formally surrendered. Preparing for document transmission." Back aboard the Valiant, Bianco and Varma watched the live feed from Riggs' helmet camera. The image of the defeated leaders signing the surrender documents filled the bridge's main display. "Transmit this to Admiral Kane immediately," Bianco ordered. "The system is ours." Varma nodded, forwarding the files. Admiral Kane has also requested an update on civilian stability. Reports suggest growing unrest in Carthanis Prime. Civilians are rallying against officials still loyal to the old regime. Bianco's gaze hardened. "Deploy ground teams to mediate. Focus on protecting civilians and preventing unnecessary violence. This isn't just about winning a war, it's about proving humanity's intent to bring stability." The final transmissions of the surrender and the evidence of the Carthanis regime's corruption reverberated across the galaxy. Neutral systems began to question the Council's integrity, and factions within the Council itself called for investigations into the conspirators. On Carthanis Prime, Riggs' team worked alongside local factions to establish order. Civilians began dismantling the remnants of the old regime, while human forces provided security and coordination. In orbit, the first human colony ships descended, signaling the beginning of humanity's permanent presence in the system. Bianco addressed his crew aboard the Valiant, his voice steady and resolute. "We didn't come here for conquest. We came for justice. Today we proved that humanity doesn't just fight, we lead. And as we rebuild, we'll show the galaxy what it truly means to stand for truth and unity." As the fleet maintained its watch over Carthanis Prime, the message was clear. Humanity's resolve could not be broken, and its place among the stars was now undeniable. Hey there again. I'm glad you've come so far. Hope you enjoyed the video. Remember to hit the like button and the subscribe button. This is really important to the channel. Really important. And I have one more thing for you. I've chosen another video for you to watch. Just click the card here, or here if you want the whole playlist. See you there.